Greg Reed stares at the quantum sensor display, his human eyes catching something the Ferengi students missed: a subtle pattern in the background radiation that matches his father's theoretical models of precursor stealth technology. His heart pounds against his chest as he realizes what this could mean. "You're wasting time again, human," sneers Dex, one of the wealthy Ferengi students passing through the auxiliary research lab. The remedial session ended 10 minutes ago. At 13, Greg is the only human child at the Galactic Academy of Sciences and Engineering on Station Delta 7. His admission through a controversial diversity initiative has made him a target for constant mockery, especially from the Ferengi students who view humanity's relatively primitive technology with disdain. The sterile white walls and advanced holographic displays of the lab feel oppressive as Greg works to capture and analyze the anomalous reading. His fingers fly across the neural interface, his movements clumsy compared to his alien classmates, but driven by determination. 3 years ago, his father disappeared while searching for the lost fleet of the Precursors, an ancient armada of warships that vanished during the Great Collapse 50,000 years ago. The Ferengi administration had dismissed Dr. Reed's theories as human fantasy, using his disappearance to further discredit humanity's scientific capabilities. "Greg, you should have logged out by now." Rosa, his young Ferengi teaching assistant, enters the lab. Unlike her peers, she maintains an unconventional interest in primitive technologies that makes her somewhat of an outcast among the faculty. "Rosa, look at this." Greg points to the quantum display. "These radiation patterns, they match my father's research notes exactly. The Lost Fleet stealth signature." Rosa's eyes widen as she examines the data. This is unprecedented, but Director Vex will never accept these findings from a human student. The mention of the Academy's stern headmaster sends a chill through Greg. Director Vex, a distinguished Ferengi scientist, has made no secret of his belief that the diversity initiative undermines the Academy's standards. Greg's struggling performance in xenotechnology courses only reinforces the director's position. "They can't ignore this evidence," Greg insists, downloading the sensor data to his personal device. "My father wasn't wrong. The Lost Fleet is real, and I can prove it." Rosa glances nervously at the lab entrance. The Ferengi administration will do everything they can to suppress this. They've built their technological dominance on being the most advanced species in the galactic community. If a human discovers something they missed. Greg sets his jaw, determination burning in his eyes. "Then they shouldn't have overlooked something this important. My father's out there somewhere, and I'm going to find him even if I have to fight the entire Ferengi establishment to do it." Greg's declaration echoed through the lab as Director Vex's imposing figure appeared in the doorway, his large Ferengi ears twitching with irritation. "And what exactly are you fighting, young human?" Director Vex's gravelly voice carried a note of warning. His eyes darted to the quantum display, narrowing at the radiation pattern still dancing across the screen. Rosa stepped between them, her hands clasped formally. "Director, I was just concluding a remedial session. Your session ended 15 minutes ago." Vex strode to the quantum console, his long fingers flying across the neural interface. "These readings are clearly equipment malfunction. Human students lack the neural sensitivity to properly calibrate our instruments." Greg downloaded the last of the data as Vex spoke. The small device in his pocket hummed against his leg, capturing evidence that could change everything. "The pattern matches documented theories about precursor stealth technology. My father's research. Dr. Reed's unfortunate disappearance resulted from his own reckless pursuits." Vex cut him off. "I will not have his fantasies disrupting my academy. The quantum sensors will undergo a complete reset protocol tomorrow morning." The director's words carried the weight of finality, but a new voice spoke from the doorway. "Perhaps we should examine the data before dismissing it. A tall human man in academy instructor's robe stood watching them. His salt and pepper hair and weathered face spoke of years in deep space. "Professor King," Vex acknowledged stiffly, "your arrival is timely. Please explain to young Reed why human theoretical models have no place in our advanced research facilities." Actually, King stepped into the lab, his eyes fixed on Greg's quantum display. "I served on one of Dr. Reed's early expeditions. His models were revolutionary, even if some refused to see it." Heat rose in Greg's chest as King moved closer, studying the radiation patterns with evident interest. Finally, someone else who understood. But their moment of validation shattered as Security Chief Kraz burst into the lab, flanked by two junior officers. "Director, we've detected unauthorized access attempts in the historical database. The source." His eyes locked onto Greg appears to be human. Rosa paled, her hand brushing Greg's arm in warning. They'd been detected. "Search his devices," Vex ordered. "All of them." Greg's fingers closed around the modified tricorder in his pocket, the one piece of technology they wouldn't think to check, loaded with everything he'd found. As Kraz's officers approached, Professor King stepped forward. "As the boy's new xenoarchaeology instructor, I should be present for any search of his academic materials." The security team hesitated, looking to Vex for guidance. The director's face darkened. "Very well, take him to his dormitory. We'll conduct a proper investigation there." Vex turned to Rosa. "As for you, your unauthorized assistance to this human student will be noted in your record." Greg caught Rosa's eye as they led him away. She gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the pocket containing his tricorder. Their secret was safe, for now. In his dormitory, Greg sat under guard while Kraz's team combed through his academy-issued devices. Professor King stood watch, his presence forcing them to maintain at least a pretense of proper procedure. "Nothing, sir," one officer reported. "Standard coursework only." Kraz frowned, his sharp teeth visible beneath curled lips. "The human is hiding something. I can smell it." "What you smell, Chief Kraz, is your own prejudice," King replied coolly. "Unless you have evidence of actual violations, I suggest we let my student rest. He has classes tomorrow." The security chief's eyes blazed, but he had no grounds to continue. As the search team filed out, King lingered. "Your father was a brilliant man," he whispered. "And he was close to something big. Meet me in the xenoarchaeology lab after hours. Bring everything you found." Greg watched him go, heart pounding. The modified tricorder felt heavy in his pocket, laden with secrets that powerful people wanted buried. But now he had allies: Rosa's technical brilliance, King's experience, and most importantly, his father's research pointing the way forward. Beyond his window, the stars of the Carina Nebula glittered. Somewhere out there, his father had found something that scared the Ferengi enough to make him disappear. Greg would find out what, no matter what it cost him. Greg waited until the heavy footsteps of Kraz's security team faded down the corridor before pulling the modified tricorder from his pocket. The device's casing felt warm against his palm as he activated its hidden backup system, a feature he'd added during late nights tinkering in the engineering lab. His fingers moved across the tricorder's interface, reconfiguring its communication protocols. The Academy's systems would see only routine maintenance data, not the compressed sensor readings buried within. Greg angled the device toward the room's environmental control panel, using its power signature to mask the transmission. A soft chime indicated success. Admiral Zhang would recognize the patterns hidden in the data stream, the quantum signatures that had cost his father everything. The room's lighting shifted to night cycle levels as Greg tucked the tricorder away. Through the wall, a faint rhythmic tapping caught his attention. He pressed his ear against the cool metal surface, decoding the pattern. "King here. ARCHIVES confirm read theory." Greg grabbed a water glass from his desk, using it to tap back. "What did you find?" The reply came in measured beats. Radiation damage on ship. Vex KNOWS. Security coming. Before Greg could respond, his door panel chimed. Rosa's voice came through the speaker, pitched higher than usual. Maintenance inspection. Please grant access. He opened the door to find Rosa's face tight with tension. She made a show of checking his room's environmental controls while whispering, "They're monitoring my terminal." Found financial records technology transfers after your father vanished. Vex is. The Academy's alert system cut through her words, Director Vex's voice echoing through the corridors. Attention all personnel. Due to detection of unauthorized human technology, Station Delta 7 is now under emergency lockdown. All human students and faculty must report to quarantine facilities for decontamination procedures. Rosa's eyes widened. They're coming for you, all of you. The sound of boots in the hallway drove her to the door. Delete your logs, she hissed before slipping out. Greg's hand returned to the tricorder as heavy footsteps approached. Through his window, he spotted movement in the maintenance sector, figures in educational consultant uniforms moving with military precision. Commander Stone's team, right where Professor King's message had indicated. The door chimed again. Security inspection, Kraz's voice growled. Open immediately. Greg eyed the waste recycling port in his wall. King's Morse code network had mapped a path to the maintenance sector if he could reach it without being seen. The door panel beeped a warning, security override in progress. He pried open the recycling port as the door slid aside. Kraz stood framed in the entrance, flanked by armed officers. Human student Reed, you will accompany us to quarantine. I don't think so. Greg dove into the port head first. The recycling tube deposited him in a service corridor 2 levels down. His tricorder screen flashed another spike in the precursor radiation signature, stronger than before. Whatever his father had found was still out there, still active. Footsteps echoed through the tubes above as security forces tracked his descent. Greg ran, following the path King had encoded in his messages. Ahead, a maintenance hatch led to Commander Stone's position. Behind him, Kraz's voice boomed through the station's speakers. Attention all security units. Human student Gregory Reed has evaded quarantine. Consider him technologically contaminated and extremely dangerous. Greg reached for the hatch controls, his father's research burning a hole in his pocket. The precursor signal pulsed again, calling to him from somewhere in the depths of space. Space. He input the access code King had tapped through the wall, and the hatch slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The waste recycling conduit stretched before him like a maze of metal arteries. Greg's tricorder display flickered with a new radiation spike as he crawled into the narrow passage. The Ferengi's obsession with cleanliness meant these tunnels saw minimal security coverage, a weakness Rosa had identified during their planning sessions. His comm unit crackled. Security teams converging on level 4, sections C through E, Rosa's voice whispered. Stay in the tertiary conduits, I'm feeding false readings to their sensors. Greg pressed himself against the tunnel wall as boots thundered past on the deck above. His tricorder's screen pulsed with increasing intensity, the radiation signature growing stronger. The pattern matched his father's theoretical models exactly, but the power levels exceeded anything in the research notes. Multiple system malfunctions detected in upper habitation rings, Kraz's voice echoed through the station's speakers, tight with frustration. All available units redirect to contain environmental breaches. Commander Stone's team had begun their diversion. Through the metal walls, Greg heard the chaos spreading, climate control systems activating randomly, security doors cycling, communication networks flooding with static. The radiation signature led him deeper into the maintenance sector. As he rounded a bend, his tricorder's screen flared brilliant white. There, embedded in the tunnel wall, a small access panel gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence. His hands trembled as he pried open the panel. Inside lay a crystalline object, its surface etched with familiar geometric patterns, the same symbols that filled pages of his father's journals. "Greg," Rosa's voice cut through his wonder. "They're implementing Protocol Omega. Vex is trying to purge the systems, but I've isolated key servers. Zhang has the evidence." The crystal pulsed in Greg's palm as he lifted it from its hiding place. Energy rippled through nearby systems, panels flickering, circuits humming with unusual resonance. The Academy's automated defenses activated, security barriers dropping into place with thunderous finality. "Warning. Unknown energy source detected," the station's computer announced. "Initiating containment protocols." Greg sprinted through the maintenance sector as barriers slammed down behind him. Commander Stone's team waited ahead, but the crystal's interference was sealing off their escape route section by section. "The crystal's power signature," Dr. Lee's voice came through his comm. "It matches the last transmission from your father's ship. We're seeing identical patterns in the auxiliary systems." The crystal flared again. Around him, communication arrays activated spontaneously, broadcasting on frequencies Greg recognized from his father's expedition logs. The coordinates embedded in the transmissions pointed deep into the Carina Nebula. "Incoming." Rosa's voice rang with urgency. "Security teams breaching maintenance block D." Greg rounded the final corner to find Commander Stone's team holding position near a sealed pressure door. Rosa burst through a side passage, her academy uniform stained with hydraulic fluid. "The protest groups have their communications grid saturated," she reported, pulling up schematics on her datapad. "We have a clear path to the auxiliary bay, but the crystal's interference is spreading." The crystal pulsed once more, its energy synchronizing with distant systems. Through the station's windows, Greg watched automated distress beacons activating across the nebula, each signal an echo of his father's last known location. "Zhang's forces are inbound," Commander Stone announced, checking tactical displays. "But we'll need to move now if we want to reach those coordinates first." The crystal hummed against Greg's chest as they rushed toward the shuttle bay, its power building with each step closer to whatever his father had discovered in the depths of space. The crystal's energy surged through Greg's jacket as they raced down the final corridor to the auxiliary shuttle bay. Behind them, emergency klaxons blared as systems throughout the Academy began failing in cascading waves. "Engineering reports total failure in Block C through F," Rosa called out, her datapad displaying scrolling streams of error messages. "Environmental systems, communications, even artificial gravity, it's all going dark." Commander Stone's team moved with practiced efficiency, securing the shuttle bay's entrance points while Dr. Lee unpacked scanning equipment from a concealed compartment. The crystal pulsed again, stronger this time. A holographic display burst from its surface, filling the air with a three-dimensional star map of the Carina Nebula. One sector glowed with particular intensity, coordinates matching the automated distress signals that had activated across the region. "Those energy patterns," Dr. Lee muttered, adjusting his scanners. "They're becoming increasingly erratic." The crystal's reaction to nearby systems is accelerating exponentially. Rosa's fingers flew across her datapad. "I found our way out. The Ferengi installed Mark 7 security gates in all critical sectors." She smiled. "Standard units straight from the catalog. My administrative code," should the pad chime, displaying a red warning. "They're revoking access. We have minutes at most." Through the bay windows, Greg spotted security teams deploying bulky equipment near the station's defensive perimeter. "Kraz is setting up experimental shield generators," Commander Stone observed. "Standard containment procedures won't be enough. We need to move now." Their transport vessel waited in its berth, the HSV Pathfinder, its sleek hull lacking the ornate design elements typical of Ferengi ships. Dr. Lee quickly established a makeshift containment field for the crystal using modified mining equipment, the human-descent technology proving remarkably resistant to the artifact's interference. Admiral Zhang's transmission incoming, Rosa announced as they boarded. The Galactic Science Council is in emergency session. Evidence of Ferengi involvement in Dr. Reed's disappearance has forced a vote. The crystal's emissions intensified, creating localized disruptions in the Academy's shield grid. Greg studied the pattern recognition dawning. These aren't random fluctuations, they match my father's sensor logs exactly. The crystal's responding to something. Multiple weapon platforms powering up, Stone reported from Tactical. Vex is activating automated defenses. The bay erupted in chaos as emergency sirens blared. Crowds of students and faculty rushed through the corridors, Professor King's protest group executing their planned evacuation drill with precise timing. Defense systems automatically switched to safety protocols, weapon platforms powering down to prevent civilian casualties. Launch window established, Stone announced. Initiating departure sequence. In the confusion, none of them noticed Security Chief Kraz's swift approach to the Pathfinder's outer hull, nor the small device he attached beneath the sensor array. The crystal's glow intensified as Greg analyzed its emissions. New patterns emerged in the data stream, a complex network of interconnected signals, suggesting the presence of other artifacts throughout the nebula. We're not just looking for a lost fleet, he realized. This is bigger, some kind of infrastructure, a whole network of precursor technology. Rosa's voice cut through his thoughts. Gravitational anomalies detected throughout the target sector. These readings suggest artificial manipulation of spacetime, exactly what your father's theoretical models predicted. The Pathfinder's engines hummed to life as Commander Stone guided them clear of the Academy's defensive perimeter. Admiral Zhang's authorization arrived moments later, preventing immediate military response from the Ferengi forces gathering at the system's edge. Through the viewport, Greg watched the Academy recede into the stellar backdrop. Director Vex's voice crackled through the communication system one final time. This isn't over, human. The secrets you carry will destroy you, just like they destroyed your father. The crystal pulsed in its containment field as the Pathfinder's navigation computer plotted their course into the nebula. Its light painted shifting patterns across the bridge consoles, each pulse drawing them closer to whatever waited in the depths of space and closer to the truth about his father's disappearance. Greg adjusted the crystal's containment field as the Pathfinder entered the nebula's outer boundary. Swirling clouds of stellar gas cast shifting shadows across the bridge displays. Power output at 15%, Commander Stone announced from the helm, running silent through the radiation fields. The crystal's glow intensified, its pulses growing stronger and more regular. Dr. Lee frowned at his instrumentation. The containment field is experiencing unexpected strain. These energy signatures exceed our baseline calculations. Greg studied the crystal's emissions pattern. The rhythmic fluctuations matched equations from his father's journals, a mathematical sequence he'd analyzed countless times during his academy research. Rosa, can you overlay the navigation data with these pulse intervals? Rosa's fingers danced across her console. A holographic map materialized, showing a series of gravitational distortions threading through the nebula's hazardous regions. The anomalies align perfectly with the sequence. It's a pathway. Multiple contacts, Stone reported. Derelict vessels scattered throughout the surrounding dust clouds. Dating suggests they're from your father's era, Greg. Rosa analyzed the sensor data. Energy discharge residue on their hulls. These ships were systematically disabled, not destroyed by natural phenomena. A warning light flashed on Dr. Lee's panel. I'm detecting an unknown device attached to our outer hull. It's generating interference patterns in the crystal's containment field. Tracking beacon, Stone confirmed. Ferengi design. They followed us from the academy. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Autonomous hunter-killer drones deploying in a containment pattern. Source vessel identified the Prophet Seeker. Captain Drek's salvage ship. We can't remove the beacon without alerting them to our awareness, Dr. Lee said, but the interference is destabilizing the containment field. Stone grabbed a section of spare hull plating. We'll isolate it physically. Basic materials can be more effective than complex technology. The crystal pulsed with sudden intensity. Through the viewscreen, a massive structure emerged from the nebula's densest region. Its geometric architecture matched the symbols etched across the crystal's surface. Scale exceeds anything in the database, Rosa reported. Definitely precursor design. Energy readings suggest it's some kind of shipyard or station complex. Greg's comm unit crackled. Pathfinder, this is Admiral Zhang. Ferengi Commerce Authority has dispatched Admiral Kex with a military task force. They're claiming salvage rights to all precursor artifacts in the sector. Professor King confirms Council observers are mobilizing, Rosa added. But Ferengi political interference is delaying their deployment. The crystal's emissions synchronized with the structure's energy field. Massive barriers extended from its surface, creating an interlocking containment grid that trapped both the Pathfinder and the pursuing Prophet Seeker. Through gaps in the energy barrier, Greg spotted a cluster of ships suspended in a shimmering stasis field. Those are Federation vessels, my father's expedition fleet. Life signs detected, Dr. Lee announced. But these temporal readings, the stasis field appears to be affecting local spacetime. Weapons fire erupted as Captain Drek's ship launched an assault. The Pathfinder shuddered under the impact of advanced Ferengi weaponry. Evasive pattern Delta, Stone ordered, his hands steady on the controls. Greg, Rosa, we need to understand how this crystal interfaces with the station's defenses. Fast. The crystal pulsed again, its light synchronizing with the ancient station's defense grid as energy beams crisscrossed the space around them. Greg extracted his father's data files, searching for patterns that might reveal the connection between the artifact they carried and the massive structure that held them in its grip. The crystal's pulsing reached a fever pitch, its light blazing through Dr. Lee's containment field. Warning indicators flashed across his monitoring station. Energy output exceeding safety parameters, Dr. Lee announced, adjusting controls frantically. The field can't compensate. A brilliant flash engulfed the bridge as the containment field collapsed. The crystal's energy surge interfaced with the ancient station systems, creating rippling waves of quantum interference. A section of the defensive barrier flickered and dissolved. Hold on. Stone called out as invisible forces grabbed the Pathfinder. Greg braced himself against a console while Rosa's fingers danced across her terminal, fighting to maintain crucial systems. The massive structure drew both ships through the gap, the Pathfinder and Captain Drek's vessel tumbling into its cavernous interior. Stone's expert piloting kept them stable, but the Prophet Seeker wasn't as fortunate. Greg watched through the viewscreen as the Ferengi ship systems overloaded, sending it into an uncontrolled descent toward a vast landing platform. The Pathfinder's backup systems engaged automatically, human redundancies proving more resilient than the Ferengi's sophisticated technology. Stone guided them to a controlled landing near the crashed salvage ship. Greg activated his modified tricorder, scanning the surrounding architecture. Multiple crystal signatures detected. They're spread throughout the facility, forming some kind of network. Through the forward viewport, suspended vessels hung in shimmering stasis fields, dozens of them, including the distinctive profile of Federation science ships. Dr. Lee analyzed the temporal readings from the nearest field. Extraordinary, he muttered. The stasis effect has drastically slowed their temporal progression. These crews have experienced mere weeks while years passed outside. Commander Stone deployed security teams to establish a defensive perimeter. Keep watch on that Ferengi vessel. They'll be looking to salvage anything they can. Rosa interfaced her systems with a nearby control panel. These access ports. Someone's modified them. Ferengi tech signatures, but crude work. Previous salvage attempts, maybe. Her fingers moved swiftly across the alien interface. The modifications created vulnerabilities in the stasis field controls. A comm signal cut through their discussion. Pathfinder crew. Captain Drek's voice carried an uncharacteristic note of urgency. I propose immediate cooperation. You're in no position to negotiate, Stone responded. Admiral Kex approaches with a task force, Drek countered. He carries orders to destroy this facility if he cannot claim it. The Admiral fears precursor technology in foreign hands would devastate our markets. Stone exchanged glances with Greg. Verify his claims. Rosa accessed long-range sensors. Multiple Ferengi signatures detected at the nebula's edge. Heavy weapons configurations. Your crystal research is impressive, Drek continued. My resources could help extract those crews before Kex arrives. Stone activated the ship's external speakers. Approach unarmed. Any hostile action will be met with immediate force. Greg's tricorder led them to a central hub where crystalline structures formed an intricate navigational array. The patterns matched equations from his father's journals exactly. He decoded their navigation system, Greg realized, examining the array. That's why they took him. Dr. Lee and Rosa worked to integrate their crystal with the ancient technology. The facility hummed to life around them, maintenance systems activating after centuries of dormancy. It's not a trap, Rosa announced, reading data streams. It's a rescue station designed to preserve ships caught in the nebula's hazards. Warning signals flashed across their sensors. Admiral Kex's probes penetrated the dust clouds, detecting the station's power signature. The task force began moving into attack position. Greg spotted familiar patterns in the crystal matrix emergency protocols his father had documented. The system could transport the entire station through space instantaneously, but required specific authorization codes. Admiral Zhang reports Council observers incoming, Stone announced. But Kex will reach us first. Professor King's voice crackled through their secure channel. Multiple Ferengi battle groups mobilizing sector-wide. They're ensuring no evidence survives. Greg studied his father's final transmission logs, searching for the codes that could save both the station and the trapped crews. The crystal network pulsed with growing intensity as Admiral Kex's forces drew closer, their weapons primed to destroy humanity's greatest archaeological discovery. Rosa's console displayed the approaching Ferengi fleet's weapon signatures. Energy readings suggest precursor-derived technology. They've weaponized it. The crystal array's light bathed the control hub in shifting patterns as Greg raced to decode his father's notes, knowing their time was running out. Greg's eyes darted between his father's notes and the pulsing crystal array. The mathematical sequences weren't just authentication codes, they formed a complex navigational map through the nebula's gravitational distortions. Rosa, overlay these coordinate sets with the station's transport grid, Greg called out, transmitting the data to her station. Her fingers flew across the controls. The patterns match. Your father wasn't just documenting the station, he mapped its entire transport network. Commander Stone's voice cut through their revelation. Kex's fleet is moving into attack position, reading weapons lock. The stasis fields and transport system are integrated, Greg explained, connecting his father's research modules to Rosa's terminal. This facility doesn't just preserve ships, it can move them. Dr. Lee monitored the crystal's output. If we synchronize our containment protocols with the main array, we might stabilize the interface enough for a full transport. Stone activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, secure for emergency maneuvers. Engineering teams, establish physical connection with the station's docking clamps. Through the viewport, Greg watched Ferengi work crews emerge from the Prophet Seeker, racing to secure their own vessel to the ancient structure. Captain Drek coordinated their efforts through portable translators, his crew's efficiency surprising their human counterparts. The station's automated systems hummed to life around them. Dormant defense screens flickered into existence, layers of energy barriers extending outward from the central hub. First wave incoming, Stone announced as Kex's vessels opened fire. Conventional weapons splashed harmlessly against the station's shields, but a distinctive energy signature caught Dr. Lee's attention. That signature there using modified precursor tech. The specialized weapon carved through the outer defensive layer, its beam leaving crystalline fractures in the ancient barriers. Greg studied the station's response, noting how its systems prioritized protecting the stasis fields containing trapped vessels. The safety protocols, Greg muttered, accessing his father's final logs. The station's primary function is preservation. His hands moved across the crystal interface, initiating an emergency sequence that combined both stasis and transport protocols. The array's light intensified, spreading through previously dark conduits throughout the structure. Energy spike detected, Rosa reported. The station is drawing power from all active systems. Protective fields extended from the hub, enveloping both their vessels. The stasis fields holding the expedition fleet began resonating with the transport grid's frequencies. Kex's weapon breached the final barrier just as Greg completed the activation sequence. Brilliant light flooded the control center. Greg felt a momentary sensation of displacement as space itself seemed to fold around them. The light faded. Through the viewport, an unfamiliar star field replaced the nebula's swirling gases. A massive structure dominated the view, another precursor facility, its pristine hull untouched by time. Multiple ships detected, Rosa announced, her voice filled with awe. Hundreds of them, precursor vessels in perfect condition. The stasis fields began deactivating in sequence. Greg watched status indicators track the revival process for each trapped vessel. A familiar registry number caught his attention, the Stellar Explorer, his father's ship. Dr. Lee monitored the life sign readings. Crews are stable. Temporal displacement readings suggest minimal subjective time passage. A transmission cut through their amazement. This is Dr. James Reed of the Federation science vessel Stellar Explorer. We've lost contact with command and our navigation systems show significant temporal variance. Greg activated the comm. Dad, this is Greg. You've been in stasis for 3 years. Silence filled the channel. Then, Greg, you found us. You actually found us. Admiral Zhang's observer ships arrived hours later, their sensors tracking the station's unique energy signature through normal space. Greg watched Council scientists document the discovery while engineering teams worked to stabilize the station's systems after its emergency transport. Rosa approached his workstation, carrying fresh sensor data. The Council's declaring this a protected site. No single species will control access to the technology. Greg nodded, studying the station's pristine ships. The lost fleet preserved exactly as the precursors left it. Drek's voice interrupted their discussion. The Council investigators require my testimony regarding Kex's weapon development program. Your cooperation will help prevent future incidents, Rosa replied. The Ferengi captain assessed their surroundings. Perhaps there are advantages to sharing discoveries rather than hoarding them. Dr. Reed joined them at the control hub, his uniform still crisp despite years in stasis. He examined Greg's modifications to the crystal interface. You integrated our containment technology with their transport system. Innovative solution. Greg smiled. I had good research notes to work from. Warning lights flashed across their consoles as power fluctuations rippled through the station's grid. The crystal array pulsed erratically, its energy patterns growing unstable. The transport sequence destabilized something in the primary systems, Rosa reported, analyzing the readings. We need to identify the source before it cascades through the network. Dr. Reed accessed a secondary terminal. These patterns, I've seen them before. The station's trying to execute another protocol.